objectives today are to elect a chair or co-chairs, and then also to review the top 3 strategies that were chosen by this group in December. We had asked you to come up with a couple of action steps, but there's some conversation that I want to have around that. I also want to spend a little bit of time just sharing with you the results that I got from your pre-meeting survey. And I really just want to thank you from the start. We sent that survey out on Friday afternoon. We got 23 responses by today, which was awesome. And really, the design of that survey was to help us create a meeting that was the most meaningful to you and that could be as productive as possible. And in that, I think there was a lot of good feedback that came out, so I want to be sure to share that back with you all so you have a chance to react and reflect and let that determine some of your next steps. Could you go to the next slide? So here's what we're going to plan to do today. As you can see, basically what I just said, I want to go over the process highlights of the survey, which were, do you think the agenda is adequate for 2 hours? Because a lot of stuff came out of that. We also asked in that process part about the decision-making around the co-chair, so I want to share results with you on that. Then we're going to do the chair or co-chair discussion, and we will be selecting someone by the end of this meeting. And then I want to look at those priorities that you all had a chance to reflect on and provide action steps to. And then we'll do a wrap-up. So here's the visual recap of what I just told you. Any comments or questions about the general plan of what we hope to do today? So to start with, I wanted to just get into a little warm-up intro opening conversation. And in teams of 2 or 3, ideally it's people that you don't know or haven't worked with or haven't talked with much yet, but pair up or get into two or 3 and talk about who you are, where you're from, and what you hope to get out of this meeting. So you want to talk about what you hope to get out of this meeting, and then what you personally will do to help make that happen. So meet in pairs of 2 or 3, have 1 to 2 minutes each. I will ring the chime when it is about 30 seconds ready to come back. The chime sounds like this. And then we'll have you report back. And what you'll report back are just the highlights or the themes that came out of your conversation. You don't have to go back through and share what everybody, you don't have to go back through and share. Your group will identify the themes that came up in this conversation. One of you will share back what those themes are, introducing the group to the rest of us. I will talk to you about that when we get there, but for now, if you have any questions, we'll give you about 8 minutes.
Okay. Well, I'm unmuted.
Hi, everyone. So who just went? Was that Julie? Or?
Yeah, that was Julie. I was just saying I'm unmuted for this moment.
Awesome.
If we're unmuted, are we only unmuted for here or are we unmuted for the whole room?
No, we're in a separate chat room.
Ooh, okay. This is Michelle. Hi.
Hi. Does everyone just want to go around and say quickly what we hope to get out of this and who we are?
Okay, I'm Julie, and I hope that we figure out what our chair situation is. and I really have no horse in that race. So I'm kind of open to the will of the larger group.
Julie, this is Maddie Philly. I'm from the American Heart Association. What company are you with? I apologize. I've seen your name, but I forget.
Rio Grande Farm Park in Alamosa, Colorado.
Awesome. So I'm Maddie Philly. I'm from the American Heart Association, and I also hope that we nail down who the chair or co-chair is going to be. I am a chair for the work group #1, and so I think it's important that we are able to hopefully work together as much as possible, at least. So excited to figure out who that will be.
This is Michelle from Community Food Share. I also hope to figure out who the chair is going to be. I would like maybe a little more information about how that, if we talk about this, it might be helpful to get a little update on the structure of anything, if anything's going to change, or if there's any acceleration of anything or effect of having a new director of the blueprint, or I don't know what I think it's the director of the blueprint, whatever that title is, and then what that means for this group, and how if it means we work faster with more purpose, with more strategy, or if I feel like we've kind of been waiting and in a kind of treading water until that happens. And I don't know if other people feel that way, but that's not like a main thing I'm trying to find out, but I'm hoping that personally I kind of find that out from this. And then what I'll do to contribute to that is I'm going to listen and pick up cues on what throughout the meeting of what my role is in all of this.
I can go next. This is Heidi. I would agree with everyone else who's spoken. I think that figuring out who our chairs are will help us move forward, because it has felt a bit like we're in a holding pattern. And I think that listening to how other people feel, as I think it was Julie said, I don't really have horse in the race either. So, but I think some people do have strong feelings about it. So I'd like to be able to hear that and help the group move forward. I don't know if that is just by creating a good space for listening or what. I also feel like what I'd like to get out of the meeting is, and maybe it's not today's meeting, but eventually a better sense of our group. I think that our group is maybe a little less defined than some of the other work groups. And I still personally don't have a good sense of where the group wants to go in terms of action items. And so I'm looking forward to that conversation as well.
This is Lane. I'll follow Heidi. I agree with everything everyone else has said. I'd like us to select co-chairs. I'd also like more definition around, if we can, before we select co-chairs, what is sort of the power, the decision-making power of those co-chairs? You know, will they completely derive the sort of policy and action direction of what we're doing? Will they just sort of keep us on track in terms of time? I think that would influence how we would approach that final decision for who the co-chairs would be. And also, just to second what Heidi and several others said, I'm really eager for us to get towards concrete activities. It has felt a little bit like we're spinning our wheels, and some of that I think is because we don't have a great collective sense of sort of where we are in terms of existing conditions and practices that could help us to better inform how do we prioritize the great objectives that are actually in the blueprint into something concrete. So I would love us to get the co-chair, understand how they'll decide, make decisions, and then start getting towards actions that we can focus on.
Hey everyone, my name's Hayden Dansky. I'm with Boulder Food Rescue, and I'm newer to this group, so I am excited to understand the process a little bit more, and I'm especially excited to look at the strategies and understand them a little more and prioritize them, because I agree that I'm so curious about like what the next steps are and how this group works together. But since I'm newer, I'm really just here to learn, so I'm here to listen and kind of tap in where I can, but very open to seeing where all of this is going.
Is there anyone else on the phone hasn't had a chance to speak?
Yeah, just real quick. This is Amanda McQuaid from Grand Junction. My office is insanely loud because of construction, so I'm really just going to communicate over chat to spare you guys. So thanks listening to it all, though.
Do we have any, now that we've sort of heard from everyone, do we have any sort of final thoughts about how we can help make that approach of getting the co-chairs and getting actionable items moving?
I think we're back to the blueprint.
Back.
Great. So we're going to go around, and if it would be great if there was a representative from your cluster who could kind of share the highlights, but it would also be nice to hear, just have you say your name and your organization, or where you're coming from. And then we'll have that one person kind of capture the highlights from the conversation. So actually, let's start with this first group here. You were a foursome.
We were a foursome, and we have Mark from the Family Resource Center, and we have Dara from the Health Foundation, obviously, and we have Elise from Jefferson County, and I'm Tim Dolan from Chaffa. And we took some notes here about what we hope to capture out of the meeting today, and I'm going to tell you what they are here in no order of prominence. So first of all, we'd like to play catch up from last month from those of us that weren't able to make last month's meeting. So perhaps find out what progress has been made so far with regard to that. But we also would like to, for those of us that are new, we would like to learn more about the process. Hopefully, not only just programmatically, but with regard to strategy and policy as well. I think overall, what we'd like to see from this meeting is obviously forward progress. So, moving the needle on what we're doing here and why we're all taking the time to be here, but also come up with some solutions in a context where we're building trust amongst the group. Do you capture everything there? Yeah.
My name is Megan. I work with Wiki Matters. I'll do our group overview and then I'll let everybody introduce themselves. Is that okay? Ours, I hope, does not. I think it has some similarities, but really what we were looking for is just some clear next steps and some movement. So I think there were some strong emotions and feelings around wanting to really put a stake in the ground and start moving towards it. Whatever, or a plant in the ground, I guess, whatever we want, but something to move towards. It feels like we've had lots of great conversations and lots of great learning, but now is the time for action. And so a desire for, obviously, the co-chair to be figured out today, and then having some really clear priorities and clear next steps at the end of this. And we were hoping that we feel like we can do that through discussion. And then since obviously our group is named Community Access and Engagement, we'd love to figure out what is that, like, we haven't really talked a lot about community engagement. We've circled around it, but really committing to community engagement. And then some type of shared document that says the working group name, and if this exists, feel free to call me out and say you just didn't find it. The name, the goals, and the progress they're making, because when we compare ourselves to other working groups, we feel a little bit like maybe we aren't making as much progress. Not that it's a competition, but we want to hold ourselves accountable. If we're going to like end this goal, like we need to make some progress. So those are the collective voices. Did I capture everything? Great. Okay, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Lynette Namba from Kaiser Permanente. I'm Donna Garnier, Montbello Organizing Committee in the Montbello Fresh Local, and Equitable Initiative.
And I'm Greg Brazier, I'm with USDA.
Megan, I want to just capture your all part in helping to make these things happen was being part of the discussion, and then you want to see action steps, you want to see some documentation of what's happening.
Some accountability. So I use that, again, I hope that doesn't trigger people, make them feel sad, but some accountability, some timelines, is what I said, some deadlines, but some clear, like what are we all moving towards, just because this is a massive undertaking, and it feels a little bit like we're herding caterpillars and we're all just like going in different directions and or not necessarily moving as one. And that's not to diminish the work that we've done currently, but that was the voice of the group looking for some more focus.
And Tim, back to your group, you all, what were some of the ways that you all wanted to help make sure we drive your agenda items forward? It could be in part of what you already said, but I just want to make sure I extract it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I captured that. So if, I guess I'd allow the group to sort of speak for themselves on question.
On how, what your part is in helping to make sure we get to our desired outcome.
Oh, sure. Like, I guess just from my perspective, certainly being open to ideas and what people want to do. And then I think, you know, at some point it's about taking ownership of doing something, whether or not that's, you know, something or some sort of document or something like that. I don't know what that looks like as much as it is, you know, taking ownership of something.
I was thinking, you know, active listening and assuming positive intent. Okay.
Also, asking questions about solutions and how to move forward, and having that be just a bigger part of the conversation.
You want to do this?
Sure. So my name is Kevin Warner. I did not take part in the group. I'm helping out with the phone, but maybe we'll take a break from the room and go to those on the phone. Is there someone that would like to report out on how that conversation went?
This is Heidi. I'm just going to jump in because I don't think we decided who was going to speak for our group. So I'll start and briefly just say most of the people on the phone really wanted to come out of this meeting knowing about our leadership, basically co-chairs, chairs, that kind of thing, and what that role is going to mean, what kinds of decision-making or leadership authority do those people have. And then we're all, I think, similar to the rest in the room, looking forward to moving on to the next step and talking more about what action steps we're wanting to do. Everyone seems very open and willing to discuss different perspectives and different needs and wants, and in a safe and productive environment. Anyone else on the phone want to add to that?
No, I think you did a really good job of summarizing our conversation. Thank you, Heidi.
And do we want to just hear who's on the phone? I see the names, but can we just hear where they're from, who they're with?
Sure. We can go one by one. Maddie, would you like to start?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, not a problem. I'm Maddie Philly. I am a Community Impact Director at the American Heart Association. Nice to see you all virtually.
Thank you, Maddie. And maybe Heidi?
Sure. Hi, everybody. This is Heidi Hoffman. I'm with the Colorado WIC program.
Thanks, Heidi. And I see Amanda. Okay, maybe we'll come back to Amanda. How about Lane? Can you hear us?
Hi, this is Lane Sapolsky with the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment.
Thank you, Lynn. And Hayden?
I'm Hayden Dansky. I'm the Executive Director of Boulder Food Rescue.
Thanks, Hayden. And Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle Orge, the Executive Director of Community Food Share, the food bank that serves Boulder and Broomfield counties. Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle. And Amanda introduced herself over chat. Her office is very loud, but she's Amanda McQuaid with Colorado State University. And then we have Julie. Can you hear us, Julie?
Yeah, I can, sorry. Julie Mordecai with the Rio Grande Farm Park in Alamosa, Colorado.
Great, thank you, Julie. Is there anyone on the phone that we missed? Okay, thank you all. We can go to Ruben, Lindsay, Maddie's group over here, maybe.
I'm Lindsay from Hunger Free Colorado. Our group kind of talked about the same things, just making sure that we're making forward progress and moving the needle and identifying some next steps. And I think, so the two other people in my small group are newish to the blueprint work, so I think they're hoping to just kind of catch up and learn. Myself, I tend to just be like, let's do stuff, let's pick something and do it. So I need to remain patient and keep an open mind and just let the process take shape. And like you were saying, Megan, not have it be a competition with the other work groups, but just trying to keep focused and making forward progress. And how we're going to contribute to that or at least myself, like I said, just keeping an open mind and being patient and being a part of the discussion. Thank you.
I'm Bree Davies, and I'm with CO4F, the Colorado Fresh Food Financing Fund.
I'm Ruben Gregory. I'm from Children's Hospital, Colorado. I'm also on the Denver Sustainable Food Policy Council.
There's just the three of you?
Yes,
Okay.
sorry.
Did I miss this group?
We were late.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, welcome. Glad you're here now.
Would you all like to introduce yourselves, Seth?
Sure, I'm Gordon Duvall. I'm a community research liaison.
And my name is Sandy Hirsch. I work with the Colorado Department of Human Services and specifically with the TFAP and CSFP food programs.
I'm Maddie Keating. I'm with the Natural Resources Defense Council. I'll do our report out, and then I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves because I think you'll all get it right. So our group kind of echoed a lot of the same report outs of the other groups. I think the biggest word that was said is action. We have all been at the table at varying amounts of times and feel as though it's important for each of us to be at this table. But there's not as much clarity on what we're doing and what we should be doing to take action as we'd like. So what we'd like to get out of this meeting is what are our action steps and what do we need to be doing? So not as much that we have an answer to those questions, but understanding what that is. And I think that we all kind of agreed that doing our part is listening, again, clarity, and then taking these conversations back to our communities or to our organizations. And yeah, I think that captures it. So do you all want to introduce yourselves as well? Sure. And
Thanks, Penny. You got it. I'm Erin Pulling. I'm with Food Bank of the Rockies.
Amy Pisani, Food Bank for Larimer County.
Karan Porter, Ghetto Fresh.
Thank you.
Hey, my name's Helen Kadich. I'm from Metro Caring, and in the interest of time, I would say ditto is about, right? We're interested in like, how do we actually start implementing the work that we have talked about? Yeah, and let's pick some co-chairs.
My name is Emma Kett. I am a community member and I'm doing some consulting work revolving around nutrition. And I'm interested in learning more about what the community is working on.
And I'm Laura McClanahan with Energy Outreach Colorado, and our part in this, I'm going to add, is that it's asset-based, it's constructive, and it's forward-moving.
And I'm Rachel Robinson from Project Angel Heart, and I was late, but ditto.
Did we leave anybody out? Okay, thank you. This is a big group, and I can just from my perspective as someone from the outside coming in, I can see where the challenges have been in implementing and getting things done because there's a lot of people here. So I want to acknowledge that. I also want to acknowledge that our primary objectives today are to figure out a co-chair or chair. And are the people who are interested both here?
I'm here.
Donna.
Yeah, Sharita has a problem with this time frame, you know, with sort of one of those concerns around inclusion that we keep bringing up. So, but I think she's on her way.
Okay, thank you for speaking. So we do want to move into that and have a decision by the time we leave at noon today. And I see we'll go through the roles description and what that entails. Based on what I reviewed, it sounds like that's really going to help line up the arrows and push the action forward. In terms of just, I do want to ask about one thing in terms of the notes or kind of the building on of what's been happening, progress from month to month. Kevin, can you speak to that, where some of that information is captured?
Sure. So the best place would probably just be in the notes for the work group, which I realize at this point is maybe not the best spot. So we can figure out a better way to consolidate and make that information more concise for everyone. But just kind of a recap, we had our first meeting in December where we started looking at the strategies and priorities. And we talked about those a little bit in the survey that a lot of you responded to. So some of that today is going to be looking at those strategies to make sure that they still resonate. If they don't, which ones do, or does the language need to be changed, things like that. Since then, we've kind of gone through more of an information gathering and presenting phase where like last month we had presentations from Metro Caring and Hunger Free Colorado, and that's been the focus since then. So we're trying to now move away from that and go back to those strategies and priorities and start developing some action steps. So does that answer your question? Thanks.
Context, yeah. And I realize just giving you a little context about me as the COO at Trailhead. I've been there since September. I used to run a nonprofit called Colorado Youth Matter that was committed to sex education across the state. And I also ran a statewide coalition around that issue. And then I worked for 13 years in sexual and domestic violence prevention. So I'm a nonprofit person. I'm not versed well in the issues here in hunger. So I'm presenting to you all as a facilitator of your discussion and your process. I'm not coming to you with any suggestions or expertise because that's what you all have. So my goal for the rest of our time together is that I keep moving the agenda forward, and then you get to help redirect if it's not working for you, and definitely insert your expertise as you see fit. And with Kevin's role and providing kind of the logistical support, if there are different ways that you want to receive information, I know that he'll be open to getting that from you as we move along. So I want to move into the survey results and the survey highlights. So if we could go back to the PowerPoint. Again, I want to just say that more than anything, I feel very grateful that of this large group, we had 23 people who took the time to respond. I know it was a fairly dense survey. We wanted to have you start to prime your mind and your brain for this conversation, so we didn't have to go back through and redo a lot. But it also did point out some gaps, and I think even this morning you all shared that there might be some gaps in understanding and a need to really make sure that, at least to some extent, you're all lined up and pointing in the same direction. So in reviewing the proposed agenda, the majority of you, 15 in fact, thought that the agenda that we have for today, selecting a co-chair and reviewing the action steps around the top 3 priority strategies that were chosen in December, seems fairly reasonable. And a couple of you too said no, it was not reasonable, and a few of you weren't sure. But really, a couple of things came out that I wanted to share back with you. One is that, and I grouped these in what I thought were the kind of key themes that came out of just this part of the survey. One is that I know you meet monthly, and still some folks thought that 2 hours is not enough time, and that is somehow impeding progress. And then somebody thought 2 hours was long. So time is an issue. I just want to acknowledge that there's conflictual perceptions of time. I know that one proposal is to figure out how to incorporate more action steps between meetings so that those of you who are ready to move on some things will have the ability to do so. And with a chair or co-chairs, that person can help coordinate those action steps. So I just want to plant that seed. There was a lot of feedback for me to make sure that I'm enforcing time as a facilitator, managing time, enforcing time, effectively, making sure that we move through. And in terms of selecting co-chairs, there was some acknowledgement that there's already been a lot of time spent kind of circling around that. And today the goal, I think, with most people is just to move forward. So we can go to the next slide. And I apologize for these dense words, but I really wanted to just capture the words you shared, because that to me was most important. The other two themes I saw, besides time and time management, were some thoughts on consensus and decision making. So there were some comments about, do we even share an idea of what consensus is? Do we understand it? Even though we've used the word, I don't think it's actually happening or has happened here. And we need a more rigorous and intentional discussion regarding the strategies. And somebody just said, I would like to see us make a decision. And the next slide will tell you the results of whether you chose election or consensus. And then in terms of decision making, and the co-chair in particular, there were a couple of responses around voting anonymously or just wanting to just make it happen. You'll see that in the next slide. Regarding the action steps, that was also something that we are going to dig into a little bit more in the second half of our meeting. General agreement on the strategy is probably doable, but full on confirming of finalizing strategies, one person wasn't sure that that was possible because of the large group. And let's see. The other issue I wanted to point out here is that there's a question about the strategies themselves and the choice around what are the top 3 strategies for this particular group. And the way that those were chosen in December, there were some questions about that. So we'll come back to this, but I just wanted to point this out up here that there was a general feeling in the responses I saw that, are we ready to move forward in action steps, but we want to take action, but we're not quite sure if we have all the information. So how do we move through that? that quandary? I'm just posing that as a question for now. Does anyone have any feedback or reactions or reflections to this first part? Because I really think this is just a helpful backbone for you all to think about how you want to move forward. And we can come back to how to use this more effectively, but I just wanted to present it to you now just to acknowledge the effort you spent giving feedback. So the next slide, we got to how do you want to make the decision about selecting a chair? We had, let's see, 3 people wanted to go through consensus, 9 people wanted to do an election, and 11 people said either was fine. Here's a comment about not reaching consensus and not having confidence that that is even possible. So I think that is a longer and deeper conversation about how the group overall wants to make decisions as a large group moving forward. But I wanted to tease that apart from the fact that there's also the decision today at hand, which is going to be through an election for the chair or co-chair. Someone did mention that in a group of, I think, over 30 people, we don't always have to have 100% agreement. 100% agreement is ultimately consensus or agreement or being willing to live with the decision is my understanding of consensus. So that's another area to like really nuance and decide together. Much too large to do full consensus. And then in terms of making the decision around the candidates, that I think the goal was we want everybody to stay engaged in this group, whether or not they are chosen as a chair. I heard that a couple. Okay, any questions about that? So elections, that's how it's going to happen. Everyone live with that. Okay. And with an election, you have the right to abstain if that's something you don't want to participate in. So I just wanted to capture, Kevin sent out in the packet the role of the chair in detail. I just pulled out what I thought were the key action verbs, just so you have this in front of you to review and think about. The chair will collaborate with the implementation director, who will be starting on May 20th, which is very exciting. Yes.
Yeah, I know an email went out to the larger group, but I realized we didn't make an announcement at this work group meeting, but the implementation director is going to be Erin Ulrich, who's from the Prevention Services Division, and yeah, she'll start on May 20th, so just a little less than a month. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, that's big news for you. Thank you, Kevin. So the chair will be working directly with Erin, strategizing work group activities, and ideally then start lining up the activities of this work group with the other work groups. So there's going to be this cohesiveness that I think will start to sharpen, and we'll develop the agendas and make sure the progress is happening. So that chair or the co-chairs are really going to be the ones that are accountable for the movement of this group and making sure that the group experiences that movement, but also that movement is communicated back to the overall Blueprint team. The chair is also serving as a thought partner. Not sure what that all means to you, but the person who can share ideas and experiences with members. I think arguably a chair would also be extracting the experiences of members and making sure that those are also centralized. So there's that. They may represent the work group on the governing council. And they would collaborate with Trailhead and I think particularly Kevin and Andrew to help ensure that the meeting logistics goes smoothly. And that you get all the information that you need to be prepared. Anything else that you want to add or seems like it's missing? Because this is just from your general overview of the role, but is there anything else in the chair or a co-chair that you feel like is important that you all should consider? Yes.
you know, some things that I'm unclear about, and, you know, I think we haven't ever really decided whether the governing council works like a board or some other iteration, but apparently we'll be discussing that on our governing council meeting on Friday. But one of the things that I guess I'm unclear about is those are, anybody on the group should be doing those things. When I've been a chair of a committee or a subcommittee or a board, that person or that role is pretty instrumental in developing the agenda for every meeting and in producing work plans and action plans and status updates. So are those elements that are not expectations for a co-chair in this situation? Is this somehow different where we're just here for decoration or what? To me, that I don't see where there is any sort of leadership role in how this is described up here.
And so I can speak to the process that the other work groups have gone through with their chairs. And Maddie, who's on the phone, is actually the chair of the Building Public Will to End Hunger work group, or work group 1. And so Maddie, if you'd like to add anything, feel free to. But essentially, I meet with the chairs once a month to do agenda planning for the next meeting and assess what sort of technical assistance needs they might have. So maybe it's utilizing our team of consultants to help with facilitation or action items or any sort of thought process with that. And so the chairs or co-chairs really do lead the development of the agendas and those items. And then they've also led the process for some of those other work groups of developing proposals that will be presented to the governing council for their work to move forward. So that's kind of the process we've done so far. This was maybe the original intent of the chair, but that was written back in like December, so it's a little bit outdated and it's kind of fluid and constantly evolving, and we want to make sure that we adapt to each work group's needs. So does that help?
Yeah, that is helpful. Thank you.
Maddie, is there anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think you did a very good job of summarizing. And I think the biggest thing with this, Kevin, as we've discussed many times, is that it is fluid, and as much as you can intend to outline the specific roles, I think every meeting will be a little different. And I think as recommendations move forward, the chair's role will continue to change dependent on what that recommendation is and what their expertise is. So for better or worse, I think, this is not set in stone. So I think that's, for some people, more challenging. For some people, they like it better.
Okay. So, yep.
I'm wondering, some of the chair roles that you've written down, in my opinion, are a little vague. And one of the things that's been identified is making sure we have accountability for moving the process forward. So if under leadership, for instance, that kind of accountability to move the process forward, if that's actually written into the job description, then when the chair, or I almost wanted to say when the unfortunate chair is trying to get the group to move forward, they can take a more, for lack of a better word, aggressive posture trying to do that, and they won't be deemed to be doing something they shouldn't be doing. I saw some nodding heads. Does anybody disagree with that? Okay.
I think there's going to be value in leadership.
Yeah.
I think it's nice to have that mandate as a leader, because that way you're a little more courageous to possibly press things forward than you might be.
That's what. And you use the word aggressive as needed. And I think what the understanding is that there's a bottom line, there's a accountability. The chair is going to be holding the group to their feet to the fire to get things done. I also heard from Maddie that there is a degree of fluidity and responsiveness in the chair, that they are kind of, and Donna, I think this is what you were saying too initially, that there is the ability to work with the group and make sure the group is also showing up, but that's the leadership part that I'm hearing as well. So between these two pieces, the flip chart, the notes that we just discussed, and then what's here on the screen, are there any other items that you want to add to your expectations of a chair? Yes.
I think making sure that we are doing what we can to incorporate members from the community, since we are the community access and engagement work group, with the diversity, equity, inclusion kind of lens, I think is important.
And I would add that on that point, that's been identified multiple times in this committee, that we need to continue to make sure we have the right people at the table.
And would you say you want the chair to be tracking on that, like, acutely, overtly?
I mean, if other people agree with that, I think that's a good.
Understanding, I think, implied is that everybody's role is also that, but the chair is tracking. Okay. Great. All right. So right now, as far as I understand, we have 2 people interested in the chair role. Amy was the third, and you decided to step out. So Donna and Sharita, who is maybe on her.
Yeah, I haven't gotten any message from her, but Sharita, the last time I talked to her, was still interested in pursuing a chair or co-chair.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Well, so here's what I'd like to do for the next part of our process. One is that I have emailed both Donna and Sharita last night with some questions to kind of recap their interest in the position and answer a few quick overview questions about that role. Then I would like for them to step out, or Donna to step out of the room, and then I want you all to decide a couple of logistics about the chair, if you want 1 chair or 2 chairs, and then Donna will come back in the room, and then we will decide if we need to do a vote. So that is how the next, hopefully, 10 minutes are going to go. And if Sherry comes in, we'll get to hear from her as well. But as far as I'm concerned, her name is still under consideration. Donna, would you like to recap and maybe next slide, Kevin?
Sure.
I'm going to share a recap because it sounds like there have been a couple of new people here, and also just kind of the need to review what's been happening. But you could hit some of these points or none of them, or just share what you'd like to share about your interest in the position.
Thank you. I would like for us to not spend an hour and a half in this process again this month. On the day that we had the last meeting, I did send an email to Sarah at Trailhead and to Cindy, who has facilitated these meetings ably in the past 4 months. I guess my comments from that I'd like to share with you. One is that I feel like that this exercise has turned into something that smacks too much of a competition. It feels like there have been underlying agendas that somehow impact this group. I don't know what those are, and I don't know that I care to know what those are. But the fact that we, out of 4 other work groups, we're the only one who has not been able to come to a chair, co-chair leadership of this group is concerning to me. And I don't know why that is. So I do have to express my thoughts and feelings about that. I look around this room, and any 2 people in this room could ably, competently be the co-chairs of this group and do what that list has suggested. No one stepped up, so I did in the end of January and responded to Kevin and Sarah that I felt that I could bring something in the way of leadership to a work group that had to do with community engagement and community access. To that end, in this email that I sent, I suggested several steps, which I believe are to your question there. One of the things that I suggested is that first we need to have a clear understanding of what we mean by community engagement and access, and what is meant by a food system that engages all elements to be sure that nobody in a community goes hungry. And I believe that there is a large gap of people who are not covered under government benefits for whatever number of reasons, and those people who can afford to go to the grocery store or the Whole Food or the farmer's market and have their pocketbook be able to pay for healthy food all month long. There's a substantial gap in the middle that can't do either of those things. And I believe that it is inherently incumbent upon this work group to address that gap, that we have people who are addressing SNAP and double up bucks and other government systems, but we need to think about all people and not just a few as we move forward. My suggestions were, which I believe like minds must work together, but I had suggested that in the time frame from the last meeting to today's meeting, that the co-chairs, because I was under the impression that we made a decision last time, but that the co-chairs would work together to contact everybody on this work group and assess their individual thoughts about what should be the scope and work of the group, and also what skills and resources and commitment each of us can bring to the table and to a work plan that would help us accomplish the goals and the overall purpose of the blueprint. I also suggested that while we have heard from really awesome organizations, the Food Bank of the Rockies and Metro Caring and others, that what we're not hearing from are those entities at the local and community level who have been doing this work. Some of us have been doing it for the better part of half a decade to a decade, and that we are remiss if we are not selecting or taking the time to talk to those. I named specifically because of my deep familiarity with the Denver Sustainable Food Policy Council, and suggested that Ruben be asked to talk about at some point the remarkable way in which an entire community across Denver was engaged in developing a plan to address hunger in our city. But there are at least 14 other local community-based food policy councils around the state that we need to hear from and talk to. So that would be another step that I think that we need to take. We probably should take all of the various plans that other communities have created around the state and do some sort of matrix comparison and see what's already happening around community engagement and access, and take from their experiences and populate our work plan with successes that have already occurred. I also commented, I've just skipped over to my little piece here. I wanted to read from you from the Denver Food Plan, and I'm not saying, I don't want you to think that I'm only metrocentric, I'm definitely not. A food system is the process of how food gets from a farm or a ranch to an individual and their family. The food system begins with the land, water, seeds, and tools that farmers and ranchers convert into food. The food system also encompasses the cleaning, moving, processing, repacking, packaging, distributing, selling, and cooking. And I would add education in there for you, because I believe that too, that happens between farm and plate for people all across our state. And such a system involves not only the consumers, but the retailers, the distributors, the processors, and the producers. So I guess I wanted to use that one to say that I've given a lot of thought to this over the last 4 months, and and believe that we have such important work to do that we cannot continue to spin our wheels in the grass. There's just way too much work to do and not enough time, and every moment we waste is people going hungry. And I'm delighted still, I would be thrilled if you changed your mind. I think you do bring a perspective from outside of Denver, but I would suggest we could include some other people who were willing and had the time and commitment to be part of a smaller working group that helps drive this work. Thank you.
So is Donna the chair?
Well,
Actually, I just nominated you.
Okay, well, I'll just take her words and let's move on. Let's do it.
As far as I understand, Sharita is still also under consideration.
Oh, and she is definitely interested. And somebody else maybe can speak on her behalf, but all of the work she does is around community engagement. So anyway.
I too want this I want to move forward, but can you briefly speak to do you have a working relationship with Sharita and you have experience, I think, yes, right, working with her, and that's positive? And
I have a very positive working relationship with Sharita. She is with the Sustainable Whatever Foundation. It used to be the Stapleton Foundation. She works with block captains all around the metro area, helping them to be leaders within their own community and supporting the work that individual communities are working to do. And then she also has her own side nonprofit that is working on food access and food security.
Is it possible just to make a motion that we have two phenomenal co-chairs who work well together and move forward with that?
It is possible to do that. Any other comments or questions before should we just move to that point? I like that motion. Okay.
Allow me to go out.
I do want to make sure that if there are any other concerns that would affect your ability as a participant of this group to move forward, that you feel confident and comfortable being able to even just ask it as a question or express it as I want to make sure I understand this or get this right. I do want to just give one more moment of pause for that.
Well, I do. I mean, I started it with saying about Amy. We don't have the equitable type of representation that we need from rural communities and from communities of color and communities of interest. So I guess that whoever, whether it's me and Sharita or any other people, is that we have to tackle these concerns that keep being raised. And that's why I suggest that there be a small leadership group in addition that really tries to, and we can work on Zoom or whatever way Kevin and Andrew are great at setting those up. Okay. So I just think that's important that we not lose sight that keeps the issues brought up in this group.
Understood. Do you think that's something, if we move forward with the two-chair system, if we can have that as a first kind of action step to create that committee but not let it stop us from moving forward with two?
Absolutely. I believe that should happen immediately.
Okay.
Aye.
Yes, Amy.
I just want to know if this is not a good time, if this is not a good time for Sharita and we put her in the position of co-chair, how's that going to work if she can't attend the meeting? Should we move the meetings then to accommodate? I don't know what her conflict is, but I have no idea. But it doesn't seem to me that we're going to make the progress that we need to make if the co-chair can't be at the meeting. So, and I'm fine with moving the meeting to whatever that means.
So one thing that Khadijah Haynes has suggested, who is working with us as an inclusivity, diversity, equity consultant, is that we at least do one trial meeting that we switch to a different time that would work better for other people. So maybe it's in the evening during the week, maybe it's on a weekend or something like that. But at least try it for one meeting and see how that works out and if we can do a permanent change. I'd be open to doing a permanent change right from the beginning, but that's something that Khadijah has brought forward as a potential kind of solution, so.
And probably we could do a doodle poll to just say, pick a time, keep it on this relatively same day of the month, but is there a better time that would work for people?
So there's action items. It's the final process question around 2 co-chairs, and any other concerns or questions that have not been raised yet. You saw in the previous slide, you know their role and their accountability. We're clear that there's leadership here, moving the agenda forward. Yes.
I have a question. Can a chair have, I don't know, an assistant or someone who sits in for them? So we can just keep it rolling?
Yeah. And that sounds like maybe the leadership subcommittee or the smaller group of people can serve as proxies or stand-ins if needed. Yeah. That sounds like a, and your point, Karan, is just so that the process doesn't slow down.
Right, because I'm, pardon me, but I'm just frustrated that we're continuing to come here every time and all we're doing is trying to figure out the basic small logistics. We ain't did nothing. We ain't did jack. And I don't do this. That's why I'm so grateful we got this coloring going on, because I don't do this stuff right here. This is a waste of time, to be frank with you.
So one of the things, I share your frustration too, and I think other people also do. One of the things I notice on the agenda is we're going to confirm the co-chair structure. And as we do that, I'm only interested in a co-chair structure if the 2 co-chairs work together, and if only one of them can make it to the meeting, the other one gives the other co-chair their proxy to vote, because I don't want to get slowed down either. And on the issue of geographic and other diversity issues, I think we can easily include that on the chair role. And I don't know whether we need a separate committee for that or not, but we can certainly make sure and hold the co-chairs accountable for those kinds of diversity issues. I just get a little wary when I hear yet another committee being formed.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I just want to give you.
Because I actually trust the co-chairs to enforce what they need to do without a committee if necessary.
Right. Okay, so Lauren made the motion that we have 2. Yeah. Can we say it again, just for the record?
Sure. I would like to make a motion that we move forward with a co-chair structure. And to echo what Mark said, if one co-chair is not able to be at the meeting, the authority and responsibility moves forward with the chair in attendance.
Second.
Sorry, just for the people on the phone, can we make sure that we're using the mic too when we talk in the room? And with that, is there anything anyone wanted to add that's on the phone?
I second. Oh, I have to go again? They don't. Okay.
All right, I would like to make a motion. Great, I got this one, guys. I'd like to make a motion that we move forward with a co-chair setup where if, as Mark said, if one co-chair is not able to be in attendance, the chair in attendance is able to move forward with the meeting and take all voting responsibility.
Is anyone opposed to that? On the phone or in the room? We are not doing it anonymous, but we are doing an election. So there's a compromise here. Anyone opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is anyone, anyone abstaining? So that means it's a unanimous decision. So the group is moving forward with 2 chairs.
What you do in your first meeting.
Telly, thank you. Thank you, Tim, for being our time clock.
And thank you, Donna. Thank you for stepping in. You have a lot of work to do, and you also have a good team to help hold you accountable and help make it work. In the next slide, I'm just going to give this to you as kind of a take-home reflection, but I do want you to, I'll take ownership of this decision. So to be thinking about what experiences, insights you bring to help the co-chairs succeed in their leadership. What you need in order to, let's see.
Print it out on the slide, sorry.
This one, yeah. What you bring, what you're going to actively show up with to help the co-chairs succeed, and what might get in your way. I just want you to be really honest and reflect about that, and then come back with the group and share that, because I think that's going to help make the group even stronger. But let's move on, because I think that really our first agenda item has been achieved. So next. I wanted to just, again, this is a recap of what you shared in the survey, so I want to take this very seriously. We presented you with the 3 strategy priorities that were chosen back in December from a long list of strategy priorities that I think you all had a chance to review. Were some of you there? Some of you part of that discussion? Okay, great. So I'm kind of starting at the end, because I thought this is kind of going to inform how we move this conversation forward. There were a few of you that were not able to identify action steps in those 3 priority areas, and 12 of you to be exact. So, and they kind of came down into these 3 reasons. One is that there is a lack of clarity around what those strategies actually mean. What do the terms mean? Are they even technically strategies? Do they make sense? So I think that that's one question we want to tackle. Another is that there were some questions about the process used to actually select those 3 strategies. I hear that there's a lot of frustration in the group and the need to move forward. And I think this is kind of an important question. Are the strategies that you've chosen for your work group even relevant and meaningful to you all? Because if they're not, then you do need to revisit and pick the 3 that are. And so that kind of flagged it for me that we can't really move forward with action steps if people aren't all on board with the fact that you've chosen priorities that may or may not be relevant. And then there was a need before getting into action steps to further review existing resources, needs, identify key players. And with that one, I think there's a mapping that does need to happen, and I think a mapping of assets is an action step. I don't think it's something that needs to happen before you pick your priorities and make action. I want to think of that more as an action as opposed to something that has to happen before you can take action. Do you understand that distinction? Because otherwise we're going to stay in a state of process forever.
Can I mention something too?
Please.
I've heard a term, and I've seen it used in some other meetings. It's called rapid cycle learning, where you begin to take initial steps and you make sure that you look at the initial outcomes of those steps very quickly. And if you're going in the wrong direction, then you quickly shift and do something different. And my perception of some of the work we've done in the past is that we want to drill down so deep before we make any decisions that we don't make any decisions. And what you just said about mapping the assets reminded me of that. We don't have to wait to map the assets to move forward. We can move forward and map the assets as we go. And if as we map the assets, that changes the direction we're moving, that's fine. But I just wanted to introduce that concept.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody on the phone comment?
They weren't able to see it, so I'm just setting it up.
I did, just this morning, if only we didn't have to sleep. But just this morning, I did compile all of your results. So I'm just sharing with you some highlights, but we can also share with you the action steps that a lot of you put some thought into around the following 3 priorities. So I want to just start by saying there's a caveat here, and I want to take this seriously, and I want to tell you that there were several of you that were able to start identifying some action steps under the 3 priorities that were chosen. So I wanted to check with you all. So my plan, at least right now, was to proceed with the assumption that we're working from those 3 priorities so that you could see the action steps that some of you had identified. After we kind of get a snapshot of each of those 3 action steps, you all decide, are we going to stay with those 3 strategies and just sharpen them up? Or do we need to look at that whole list of strategies again and pick some? But I don't know if you can answer that question until you see what you've already put some thought into. Does that sound okay?
And just in case it wasn't obvious, just to provide more clarity, but the strategies are in this document on the 2nd page under the title, How We Get There. And that is how we selected this 3 strategies initially at the December meeting. So
Either stick with priorities or strategies, but they mean separate things.
yeah, absolutely.
So there are the 3 priorities. That's where we need to go with that.
Yeah.
Those are the priorities.
Thank you.
So where do we go?
Okay, so we're referring to the 3 that we chose as
Priorities.
priorities. Okay, so, with the next slide, we started with, the priority of build upon successful statewide delivery systems to increase the amount of and access to nutritious, fresh foods in all communities. So, this is kind of a rough summary of what I saw as kind of repeating themes. It's going to be your job to look at the details to decide if I hit it right or not. But I kind of caught a few things under this priority. One was an action step around inventorying and assessing the delivery system. Do a comprehensive assessment of assets and barriers. Again, that's an action step under this priority. Find ways to increase SNAP and WIC enrollment. And then a couple of other suggestions that didn't quite fit under categories, but one was designing or creating a web-based app or website for resources and supporting and implementing community gardens. Those are action steps under this number priority. What are your reflections, reactions, comments about this?
Can we go through all of them and then react collectively?
Sure.
Can we go through all of them and then react collectively so that we can call it? Because I think maybe when we see them as a group, we would be able to reflect okay, I'm getting some head nods. Great.
That sounds good. Thank you for that. Okay, so move to the second priority, which is, Kevin, could you go to the next one? Promote community and consumer-driven models that effectively connect people with nutritious food resources and integrates their leadership into policy and systems improvement. So under this priority, there were a couple of things that fit under advocacy, advocacy for policy change, advocacy for procedural change. But advocacy was the action word. Reviewing models, figuring out what's in place and building on it, getting buy-in from the community. This was attached, those 2 action steps were attached, but I think the repetitive theme was we always have to keep including community here. Marketing, something about mobile farmers markets, not farmers markets. Expand donations through various venues, which included city, state, and county options, as well as other venues. Support food pantries, develop meaningful feedback systems, and promote and improve the developed food bus app. You can see some of the action items were very broad, and some of them were very specific, but I appreciated that. That was the question we was asking actually. Okay, and so the third strategy was strengthening the capacity and efficiency of local food banks and food pantries to reach underserved Coloradans through additional funding and purchasing power. And again, we had another advocacy theme under this one. And, I called it a theme if more than one person said something like that. So because there were only about Actually, with these strategies, I think people got fatigued with the survey, so I got about 15 responses on the strategy. So engaging Colorado Environmental Health Association to raise awareness, review food banks, connect food banks and pantries to philanthropic partners, and focus on those that don't have adequate food supply, inventory local food banks. So those were the responses we got to the survey. So now that you kind of have a kind of a collective batch of information, what are your, do you feel ready to go into your responses or thoughts about what you're seeing here?
I'm ready to share my thoughts. This is Megan. I recently went through a leadership training where they said my personality can come off as aggressive and sometimes too direct. So I want to own that if you're feeling that. But I am open to all of your feedback, but I would like to also be direct and move this forward. So I think a place in which we are having some like internal confusion around is that our title is Community Access and Engagement. But then when you look at what our goals are, it feels like there is some rubbing there, right? Which I think shows up in our strategies. I've heard people say that we want to serve the gap. Therefore, the folks who are either food secure and or who are utilizing federal nutrition programs, but the in-between. And that is actually not what our goals are. So how do we reconcile that? And then my third point that I feel like we need to think about is this, like how do we reconcile what our goals are versus this title? Because are we food access through community engagement, so through engaging the community, or are we food access and community engagement? I have some ideas around how we could flow through that, but I'd love to just put those thoughts out there that that's where I'm having some issues reconciling, because it feels like what we're saying is community engagement, but when I read our goals, it doesn't actually say anything about community engagement. So I want to pause and see if that resonates with anyone else and if we need to address that to be able to move forward.
May I speak?
Yes, of course.
So as I'm listening to this and I'm thinking about what I've seen just recently with Colorado Health Foundation coming down here to do some community engagement on a grant that we had, it was really interesting, you know, because as executive directors and directors of nonprofits, do we really engage the people that we serve in a really direct way? And, you know, we think we do, but then it was really fun to see what our farmers at the farm park felt that they needed. And we had written, we really want to use the farm park to provide food to food banks, but we can't afford to do it unless our farmers get paid. So we put a strategy together around that. And I just think that there are some really interesting strategies that can happen from the people up to us as leaders. And so I don't know how to write that, but as I was listening to this and you're talking about engagement, that's what I'm thinking about, is how do we bring the people through our leadership into the space to tell, you know, and they're also on our board, the folks we serve and everything, but, you know, in terms of making sure everything that we write, everything that we do has their ideas and concepts in them.
Could I make a motion, or you can all turn it down, but I don't even know if it's feasible. So first, I want to ask, can we change the work group goals 2 and 3 to include the word community engagement in them? Because I think what's difficult is I can see how we got to the strategies that we got and the action steps based on these goals, because they totally make sense. But then I feel like what I hear from this group and what I just heard on the phone is this desire to do like listening sessions or kind of community-led, having the community lead to these goals versus us lead to these goals. So that's my 2 cents. Wendy wants to talk. Yes, I got it. Pass.
Thanks, Megan. This is Wendy Muschietti with Well, Colorado. So everything you're saying makes complete sense to me, Megan, but I would actually propose, I'd flip it and propose the reverse, is that, similarly, everyone can push back, I could be thinking this totally wrong, is that, to me, it seems like we're talking about an approach and a process and the way in which we do our work and our values, which are so important that I don't actually think it is a goal. I don't think it should be anywhere in our goals and strategies. To me, at least the way my brain works, is that a goal and a strategy is very specific, it's very content-oriented, it's topical. Like number 3, to me, this is the only one of our 3 that makes any sense to me, to be honest, right? Because we agree to increase the purchasing power of food banks and food pantries. Check, right? I can actually visualize that. And so I feel like we need to have those kind of strategies, but community engagement and finding the opportunities, that exactly what Julie is talking about, that is cross-cutting. That is how we should do all of our work. And it's not just on our committee. That's up to every committee. If you're talking about SNAP and WIC enrollment, which we do need to address how that fits in here, because that's a whole other work group, isn't that exactly how they should be doing their work as well? I feel like this is something that's up to the governing council and to all of us, but to other, the whole movement here, to say, how do we all really focus on integrating that approach to all of the strategies? And since I have the mic, I'm gonna keep talking. To your first question too, on strategies 1 and 2, what hit me when I saw those up there, the action steps are, this is exactly why we need to go back and revisit especially 1 and 2, because those action steps, not one of those was like the other one. They were all over the board. And to me, that means that there's not a shared understanding and they're not strategies. So they might be onto something, but they need a lot of work.
Can I just say from a practical standpoint that my impression of kind of our work here was that the goal 2 and 3 were identified by the blueprint itself, and therefore our marching orders are to implement those goals. So I'm not sure that it makes a lot of sense from a practical standpoint to try to go back and revisit or somehow.
And Tim, you're talking about the strategy language, right?
I'm talking about goals 2 and 3.
Oh, I was gonna say, because the strategies 1, 2, and 3 are literally taken from the blueprint. They're like language from the blueprint and hunger.
Right, but those are like, how do we get there? I'm talking about goals number 2 and 3.
No, but I'm also saying our charge is to implement the blueprint, and those were, I don't know how, we'll find them strategies, I'm literally like on the blueprint website.
Right.
Look under, there's like, I think the exercise initially was that we were going to prioritize the things that were identified, the actions or strategies or however we want to call them in the blueprint. And those 3 were prioritized, but those are direct, that language is straight from the.
And I think we're saying the same thing,
We are.
Dara,
Yeah.
which is, if the language is clunky, that's unfortunate, but let's not try to go back and revisit the semantics at this point.
Or we can talk with the governing council. I mean, yes, we are saying the same thing. So, and I agree with Wendy in thinking about kind of a value, shared values, or the way we do our work to say, like, we engage with the community. Like, those are approaches, and I agree. It should be maybe the governing council. These are things that all of the work groups should be doing.
Can I wrap up and repeat back? So it sounds like we will not be changing the strategies. We may change the priorities. What are all those? So it sounds like the wording is stuck. It sounds like there needs to be some consensus around that all working groups should have a value of engaging the community, which seems to be true. So maybe that, the value versus doing it, we need to see some movement. But then it feels like there's some internal rubbing with this group. So I don't know if we all need to reconcile, yep, we're here for goal 2 and 3. We're on board and we're sticking forward to do those, or not, because we keep circling back and having conflicting, I feel, as a member, that we're not fair on that. But if people disagree, then let's go. But I think just saying these are our marching orders and we have to keep the wording, we can pick which ones we want to prioritize, but that's what I guess I heard through the different comments. But I also, I think Amy wanted to chat, so I'll step off.
No, I just, the work group 2-3 goal was established by the original Blueprint Committee. I was at the meeting in December. I recall that we looked at the strategies that they laid out and prioritized them. Is there any room not to change the goal, but to change the strategies if this group sees fit?
That, I don't know that anyone has an answer to that.
I mean, I would look to, it's not for me. I'm looking at Mark. I think that if this group brought a rationale to the governing council and said, you know, we've had these really rich discussions, this is why X, Y, Z, we want to go in a different direction or tweak this a little bit, I don't see why you couldn't make that recommendation, but I think it would need to be a recommendation, probably. I'm looking at you.
Well, yeah, and that's a little bit what I meant when I said, let's continue to move forward, and if we need to tweak it as we go so that we can move forward, let's do that. One of the things I see when I look at this is I might pick slightly different wording. Like one of the things we all know that it's a very fractured system because we all talk about it all the time, and we need to do a much better job of weaving it together to serve gaps and barriers. I don't see that kind of language in here, but when I look closer, it actually is, if you look at it that way. But I think there's a way to tweak some language to get to where we need to go. And that's just me on the governing council. I don't know if the whole governing council agrees. But clearly, if we get consensus that there's a better way to do this, that's what the governing council wants to hear.
This is Maddie. I really appreciate the going back to, can we keep moving forward while we think about the language here, because clearly there's kind of a disconnect. But there's also, even if they're not all aligned based on what everyone's thinking and interpreting, there are a lot of ideas to keep generating action that have been displayed, even through a survey that was put out Friday night. And if we were able to generate these in that kind of time frame, I don't think that we should lose that momentum by trying to reword these strategies, even though that is really important. So if we can take the time to do both, move forward on some of these or continue to generate and hone in on the action items while still building more clarity, I think that's really essential to getting to what most people spoke to for continuing action. I just feel like when I'm in these groups, you know, it's so important for like being united and collaborating effectively to all be on the same page, but it's really easy to get tied up in like 2 or 3 words that at the end of the day aren't going to get us to like engaging an association to think about this issue. So I just want to flag that.
So this is Donna. How many people were at that December meeting? So maybe half the room was. I recall being there and thinking, what in the heck are we doing? I have no idea what would just happen. And I still not sure I know what just happened. So to assume that the half of us who are here now and consistently come to these meetings even had a clue about what we were supposedly doing, I think is erroneous. I don't think that we did. I mean, well, I see head shaking. So I guess we all feel like okay. So I think that it is important that we go back and not assume that a decision made in our naivete is where we are today. I think that the maturity in the governing council over the last several months should help guide us at this point. But, you know, when I look at here all the ways of how we get there, I would really hope that we are only not just picking 2 or 3 out of each of those, because all those things need to happen. So I guess my whole point here was that I think that we need to revisit whether we think the priorities are still the priorities, but know that we have to accomplish the goal.
This is Tim. I'm just going to echo what Donna said, because as I recall, and I was at the December meeting, that the choice of the top 3, how we get there, priorities, I guess they are, you know, that wasn't a very extensive process. It was sort of just go and pick the top 3 that you like, and these are the 3 that bubbled up. But in my mind, that doesn't mean that the other ones don't have strong merit. And it occurs to me that, you know, a lot of these have overlaps. So I'm wondering if there's a way to refine so that we can take these, I don't know, what are there, a dozen of them, and refine them down to 4 or 5, you know, that encapsulate everything.
This is Lane from.
It's okay. I was just going to say,
write these up and start capturing. I feel like I'm hearing some action items, and that would help me as a visual person. I don't know on the phone if that would help anyone else, but that would help me. I feel like I'm hearing nuggets of action items that we're all head nodding to.
And
So
I want to interject as well with another process point, but
you're late. I don't want to cut off the person on the phone.
This is Blaine from PhD. I was also at the December meeting and had a similar level of, I felt a circling around understanding what each of the strategies and goals that were outlined for us were supposed to be. There was a lot of different types of discussions in those breakouts about the different topics, the different strategies, and we didn't necessarily come to agreement. We just sort of collected and collated. So I would love us to keep those goals and strategies, examine the others, and see if there is low-hanging fruit. But I think most importantly, to help us move forward in an actionable way without having to recycle back fully, I think we need to decide how we prioritize. Our Food Policy Council, Ruben can speak to this too, has set up a sort of series of values and criteria for how we decide on which policy actions to move on. And that has been really helpful framing for us. And I think that we have the collective knowledge and thoughts that have already started to bubble up about how to set those things that we could use to outline some criteria for ourselves. So that even if we, need to re-examine some of those past decisions, we know the framework in which we are deciding.
Okay, thank you, Lainey. So, and Megan, you've heard some action steps that you want to make sure we're not missing.
I mean, I'm wondering if, I feel like there's some disagreement and some action items, and so I just wanted to list them and find a way for us to vote. And it sounds like that was what people wanted, was election style voting. So we could just vote to say like, yes, we are circling back. No, we're not circling back. Yes, we are, just to kind of move us forward. But I also am hogging the mic, so someone who hasn't spoken can also share their opinion on that.
So what I'm hearing is that you have goals, and those goals are in this green box, and those are the overarching goals of this work group that no other work group has, correct? Every work group has that list of how we get there, and that's what we've been calling strategies, and then we prioritize the strategies. But there is this, at minimum, I'm hearing confusion about if those are actually strategies, why aren't they strategies that infuse a lot of the work that we do? And then I'm hearing that also got, with those strategies, priorities that we have, the top 3 were chosen by less than half of the group here. They don't make sense to many of the people here. And yet there is clearly some interest and idea about what do action steps look like. So I think one of the things Wendy said is that there's a little bit of a confusion around the difference between what are an approach, our values, what are our goals and strategies, what are action steps. So I think that that's the first step I'm hearing, is that we need to get a clear understanding about what we're talking about, because we're also kind of flowing back into process too, around how do we want to get there instead of what it is that we're actually doing. So I think the first vote that I want to have you all consider is, you have your goals, and those aren't going to change, correct? Those are set. Those are set. But the strategies are less clear, and so the first question is, do you want to revisit what your strategies are, the how-to for your goals? Kind of the bigger picture, like, what are the strategies overall of this group? So do you want to revisit that? But before we vote on that, I also wonder if you might have more momentum if you also start generating the action steps that you think could be possible in the group. And then from there, we back it out and identify the themes and create strategies around that. And I'm sure I want to be confident that those will then align with something in that list of how we get there, but they might just be framed a little bit differently. But really, for this group to actually move forward and have momentum, you have to both own the ideas and own the language around it so that you understand what you're doing. Otherwise, you're filtering and interpreting, and then we have 30 different ways of thinking about this. So in some ways, I would propose thinking about the fact that you have energy to start generating action steps. Doesn't mean you're going to commit to them, but once people start identifying, this is what I'm ready to do here, then you can back it up and see what are the themes. That's one idea.
So I don't disagree, Lisa, but I want to know how we're not going to find ourselves in this situation 4 months from now, because everyone who is in this room who was there in December had the ability to come to the other meetings, and we keep opening up this committee to more and more people. And so you might have a completely different group in 4 months who says, I didn't decide on those strategies. So I feel like this committee needs to make some kind of commitment around how big it's going to be. Actually commit ourselves to being here to see this work through. Not that nobody else can ever come on, but in the last 4 or 5 months that I have been to meetings, it has been a different set of people every single time. We are never going to move forward.
And I like the idea of taking ownership of the language, but I would just caution us, and I was not that involved, so I would turn to the folks that were involved in the development process of the blueprint, but that was a year-long process, and these strategies are what came out of that process. So we're opening back up a process that just finished, that took a year to produce these strategies. So I'm open to kind of thinking through it, but I just encourage us to, I don't know, I don't want to reinvent the wheel here.
I think that, you know, the blueprint is our blueprint, and we are obligated to work with the language and the how we get there. I think, again, I keep saying, I feel like for me that part of the problem is that we're not using a consistent language. There are work activities on here. I would love, this is where I think of a small committee working together, 2, 3, 5 people, to take this and try to put it in a format or a template that begins to look like a work plan with some potential activities. And again, taking this information from the survey could help to populate that piece of a work plan. So that was really my thinking about what a subcommittee would do. Not everybody, like there are 15 co-chairs of the group, but really to take on some actual work and produce something in the next week to 10 days that everybody reflects on, adds to before we come back to this meeting again. But I underscore what Amy's saying. We cannot have an open process that manipulates what we're doing every time we meet again.
I just want to turn to the phone. Juanita has asked for a chance to speak.
Hello, everybody. This is Juanita with Servicios de la Raza. And I've been to the meeting. I went to the December meeting, and until the meetings changed to the last Wednesday of every month, which is our mandatory staff meeting, I'm only able to join by phone. However, I want to say that when I was first approached by my ED about Blueprint, I was very, very excited to come on board. I realized the first couple of meetings were logistical, but after that, I thought we were going to get down to some really good work with our community. And so hoping moving forward that we will be able to possibly change meetings to even a Saturday morning where the community can come down, or an evening time, maybe around a dinner hour, and have community come down and give us their ideas, because my main focus was reaching the community, our communities that are unreachable. And I think if we're going to end hunger in Colorado, that's where we need to start, because the other communities already know we're here. They know what we can supply. So I guess my question is, or my thought is, when will we really be getting down to the core of Blueprint? I realize it is just a blueprint right now, and but I really would like to see something specific happen out of these meetings that we're all so very passionate about. And I agree with different people leaving the meetings and not coming back, but I think that might also be because we are not moving forward with the blueprint. We're still stuck in logistics. So I don't know if that makes any sense to you all, but those are my feelings.
Thank you, Juanita. Okay, we have 15 minutes. Here's a new plan. Want to recap what I just heard. Again, I don't think anybody's deviated from the push for action. It's time to meet. I wasn't aware of the fact that the committee keeps expanding and contracting. So I understand that that's also a reason why there hasn't been a lot of decision making. I'm just going to try to keep this simple. Based on what I just heard, I'm going to propose a vote around, can you live with the 3 strategies that were there, knowing that the language is imperfect, it's not clear that they're strategies, they need to be defined, but if there were work groups or a work plan that came up with how does this want to move forward with those 3 strategies and those action plans, that you can just trust to some extent, like Martina was saying, but it's a dynamic.
Rapid cycle.
Rapid cycle learning. Trust that at least you have a container to capture some of the key work. We assume that community engagement is going to be infused through all of it. So the question is, do you feel that you can participate in moving forward with the 3 strategies that were chosen in December, and now do the work of massaging and refining it so that it really makes sense and matches what you want to be doing?
And can I make one little either comment or proposal? I don't know what it is. I like Donna's idea of getting a working group together to massage this fuller, because what could happen is a working group, and I think that is the role of the chair or co-chair, is to try to drive the work forward in between our meetings. And it might take care of some of your concerns, Amy, too, where that kind of working group can come back to us and tell us what they think is most important, but more importantly, they can tell us why they think that, and what they studied and what they've discovered, and why they're advocating for it. Because I think it's hard for 30 or 40 of us to get together every so often and just, it's not the first time we've seen it, but it's the first time we've been able to focus on it hard. I wouldn't mind being led through that by a group who's been really working on it.
I second that. So, and then the repeat, the action would be that our co-chairs between now and a set date, so a timeline that we can propose, you said 7 days to 10 days, that they would propose and look at the strategies, make a work plan, send it back out to us to react to, so that we can have a discussion the next time we meet, with the goal at the end of that to say, yep, we're gonna, like, we are good, is it? So, that's what I heard you say.
Tim, then Wendy.
I tell you what would help me is, would it be possible to take these 14 strategies and group them into 3 or 4 theme areas? Because, in looking at these, I'm concerned that in December, what we really did was just pick the 3 that sort of sounded like matched the goals. But in looking at this, I'm seeing that, there's some things that are sort of overlap and are overarching, and then there are things that are really specific, like tax credits, which is a lot different than nutrition. So if it was possible to take and say, okay, here's 3 or 4 theme areas for the strategies, not changing the wording of the strategies whatsoever, but just grouping them. Right. Because what that might help us do is say, hey, instead of saying, these are strategies, let's work on these 3 strategies. It might be, let's work on these 3 areas.
Maybe you can chair that work group.
Could that just be a part of the action item that the co-chairs have committed to?
And that's where it's going.
Okay, good. I added it. Thank you. Wendy?
Ditto.
Yeah, an honest ditto for the yes.
Ditto, Tim, you said that way better than I could. I honestly do think this is like a 10-minute exercise.
Yeah, I mean
10 minutes.
Yeah.
To look at those 14, to restructure them, and to maybe pull out the ones that are very process-oriented, that aren't actual strategies, And I would just add, if that could be done, and as I'm saying, this is great, I'm happy to like weigh in on that if possible, but I don't think I think it could be done very quickly. I trust you all. If we could get a little work done before the next work group, I do think this could be done via email. I think that you could send out a proposed list along with some prioritization criteria. So let's just take, Lane, if you could just send to Donna the criteria that SFPC uses, if you think it's been really a beneficial exercise and a tool. And then Donna, if you could send out, here's related strategies, here's the proposed criteria, please become prepared at the next meeting with your prioritized strategies. I think I'm saying the language right now. I think we can move a lot quicker. And I think there's a, Dara, to your point, it's building on the foundation. It's not redoing it. It's taking their cue, it's building on that work and making it better and hopefully moving very quickly to action. So thank you guys for doing that.
Well, the reason I said 7 to 10 days, because if you suggest something that involves work, you should be willing to do it. And I can do it in 10 days. And so I would love to be able to take a stab at this, and maybe some of you who had other thoughts about it could look at it and put your thoughts to it before in 10 days we send it out to everybody else for reflection. Would that work for people? But if you really want to volunteer to work on it, please don't hold back.
So we'll have people who want to work on it at this stage before it goes back out to the whole group will contact Donna. And if Donna wants to contact you, she might do that as well, to bring you in, if you haven't contacted her immediately. And then you'll work on this with the task of looking at the survey info, drafting a work plan, but also looking at the overarching strategies to see if you can at least group them or categorize them into themes, identify which are process, which are strategies, but have that inform your decision making, and then the group will have something to react to and reflect on at the next meeting, which will be your primary task. Is everybody, so no votes, but any objections? And by objection, I mean, is there something where you just honestly cannot participate in this plan? Because you still need a piece of this. I would also like to propose at some point, and maybe it's a different committee, but a different piece of work, is to identify how big you want this committee to be, to identify the terms, how long you want to serve on this committee, and to identify how you bring in new people. Because I hear that the value is that you want community engagement and input, the name of your work group, and at the same time, you're identifying that in the last 5 months that you need to have some container around it in order to move forward. Otherwise, you're just sharing information, which is also fine, but it doesn't sound like that's the purpose of your. So those are two of the key action themes that I'm hearing come out of this. Is there anything else, anything I'm missing?
I would just volunteer to take that. I would love, obviously, like consensus of the group, but I can take a stab at like how big, term, close, how do we engage the community, and we can include it in the sending out so that we can kind of look at those collectively. So I'll take that piece.
And I have one request, and to Amy's point, I'm very guilty of not being here, literally not at all since December, since Wendy, is that since it weren't doodles and all that, I've literally physically not been able to be here since December, but I've always sent some from my office that I prep before the meeting. So I'd just like to, could we address that? Like, is that acceptable? Or does it have to be the actual individual? If we could, because either way is fine. I just think we need to be clear on them.
Okay. How big, term, membership, proxy. Engagement, community engagement, correct? What are we each going to do? Right.
And, oh, can I add one?
Never mind, I did not, I unvolunteer. Around the community engagement piece too, I think it's not just what we can do, what we bring to the table, but also ideas about the various ways that could look like. I think we'll need on the phone, so it's something about like Saturday morning meetings, but if there's ideas about, I don't think it necessarily means like we always have a monthly meeting that's 2 hours on one day. There could be standing meetings plus other activities, other events. So if we could put some thought to that, I think that'd be great.
So, Wendy, while you're giving out assignments to people, I have one for you. Could you please get us a list of all known food policy councils around the state? Thank you.
Okay, we have 5 minutes left. So we're gonna do a short closeout conversation, but I really just, I think in the spirit of time, we're gonna have you move back up in a small group. I think that what I'd rather have you do is just, anyone who wants to, maybe those who haven't shared as much, share 1 or 2 of your thoughts on how your desired outcomes got met or didn't get met. What did you get out of this meeting? What did you get out of this meeting? What are you leaving with? What's your takeaway?
Well, I'll say, I think that there's at least a couple action items, so good job.
This is Juanita. May I speak? Honestly, I think this is one of our more productive meetings because we're finally speaking out about getting some action items done. And I really do appreciate sitting on this group. So let's get to work. And thank you, all of you.
Thank you. I do want to end by saying thank you as well. I think there's no question that you're all here because you're extremely devoted and committed to this issue. And I know that you're just ready to put your ideas and passion into action. So I think now we have co-chairs that you are able to hold accountable and work with to make these things happen. Any other final comments, Steve?
Yes, I know I'm not the only one who has been puzzled, confused, flummoxed about the process of this entire blueprint. So I have a question. What happened to our consultants who have been here for the last 4 or 5 months? Cindy and Jennifer, are they in? Are they out now that we hired Aaron? I guess what's happening?
Sure, I can answer that. So as we've started to integrate co-chairs more into the process, we're wanting to kind of transfer some more of the leadership and decision-making to the work groups themselves through that chair or co-chair structure, and also through the governing council and soon Aaron, the implementation director as well. So with that, the consultants are still very much involved with the project, but it's more so that the co-chairs are kind of requesting what specific needs they have of them for certain meetings. So it's likely that you'll see them in some meetings and not in others as they're needed, but we've just kind of made a decision that from now on, they won't all be in every single meeting. Does that answer your question?
I agree with that.
It does, and that's fine. I was just curious about what had happened.
Yeah, so they're still involved.
Okay, and then, is the intent for Aaron to be at all of the blueprint committee meetings?
I don't think we've discussed that with her yet, but I would think likely so, yes.
Okay.
I just want to give a shout out to Lisa for wrangling this, because I feel like we've all been on the other end of this where you come in and been like, okay, cool, there's a lot of emotions and feelings here. So we've all been the facilitator before and had to be the receiver of this energy. So I think you did a good job receiving it and then putting it back out. So I think everybody, I appreciate that and the openness to move us forward. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And one last thing, I'm sure Donna, Sharita, and our team would appreciate any feedback on the meetings moving forward. I know this was more productive than the others, so that's good to hear. But with that, there's an evaluation form on the back of your packet, and we would love to get that feedback back from you all. I'll also send out an electronic version and a follow-up email. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a great day. Enjoy the sunshine.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Okay.
Congratulations. Thank you. Well, I'm like, y'all are, and I'm like, that's nowhere. Sometimes I'm like, let's do it.
And then,
So, I'll show, I'm trying to own that.
Right. Either way, that's why I did not respond to that. And I thought I was not really trying to. It's hard. That was very. I was. Yeah, trying to like turn. Longer than so that's too hard. That's not the fair part. Yeah, you're Lowry. For thinking. I have a problem with her. I won't leave. I know how to put this down. Right. So yesterday.
All right, I'm back.
Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you. There was something else that I was like, work. Right? Something irrigation and irrelevant. Something like all of it. Thank you. Thank you. Here's like, she's about her network. But I laughed, we went from a 7 to 2. Cumulatively 25, of which 4 not I think the one that makes the market regionality. So I was like, now I think. Yeah, no, that's where else is it? Yeah. I have been nice to 5 months and I don't have a board. Like, so, I was just gonna ask, what is my size? Yeah, well, right, or most like. Yes, they are. Really? Yeah. I think they're getting like about it, which is fair, but now that they see my sister, okay, and they're not being great, I'm like, okay, no, I just it's not. I just had a. Access, like they should be the ones in that area versus like every. Yeah. And it was right. If I will just have like 30 of them. Okay, I'll add that up there. Bye. Thank you. Okay. How are you doing? Good. You can help like corralling. Okay. I think it's something that like adds value. Yeah, right? Okay. I know. Well, and I was on the phone, so honestly being on the phone, it's like working hard. I'm feeling. Congratulations. I'm laughing so bad. Congratulations. No, I volunteered for 2 big things. Good. You can email me when somebody's book, tag me in. I also can just like type and organize things as neat. So even if it's not my perspective, but just like some grunt work to pass off. Great job. Okay, bye. I don't care. I was drinking tea. Somebody said I needed to work on my cheek. Even better word love. Give me some time to work on my cheek. I'll take it. I was pretty. I never valued it. So I did. I finished up the annual. Yes. Okay. Well, hopefully you come back.
feel like you may never come back. We did it. We've all been on that. I also was like, bless you for taking all of that energy from the survey responses, because I've had to be the person who reads everyone's energy, and they're like, oh, you have a lot of emotions tied to this, and I don't feel good about receiving it.
I'm happy to provide feedback over our time.
Yeah. Sometimes I have to receive a lot of surveys, and I'm like, wow. I think that one personally, but I think I might.
Yes. I'll reach out to you.
Oh, you're fine, I can. Yeah, for Robin. Group everything over here.
So I'll get feedback, and I'll send you like my ideas around membership, all of that. Okay. Cool, thank you.
Thank you. All right, thanks for volunteering.
Kevin, how else can I help you?
I was wondering if you.
I think we're all right.
I know.
We're good.
No good?
Yeah.
Should I put that in here, or should I put it back?
It was not in here, so yes, it was.
Do we have our fresh?
Hey, Cindy. Who's in that room back there, right?
Yeah. About what?
About your goal. You know, I'm with it.
Just how much. And that was the thing I was so excited, that's why I wanted Megan here.
Sure.
You're observing.
Yeah.
And you're also saying.
So I do like facilitate a lot of small group meetings, mostly over Zoom for like other projects, but I mean like pretty intimidating honestly, but I guess still. But another thing is that like Michelle used to take minutes. I've been doing it for like a little hectic trying to manage all this stuff, and I mean a lot. Most communities have secretaries who take her or something like that, and it's just a role that we elect for a work group member to responsibility outside. Yeah.
Do you have to go through that room?
Oh, there's a door on the side.